Hello and welcome to the IEEE SA Google Hangout. Today we are talking about empowering the connected person through the IoT, body and wearable health innovations. So we're going to be talking about devices, connected devices, all of the innovations in that space, particularly around health, and how we can leverage as many benefits and manage the risks and understand the space better. We have a fabulous panel of experts that I'm going to hand over to you shortly to introduce themselves. Just a little bit about the IEEE Standards Association series of Hangouts. We use these Hangouts as an opportunity to connect with audiences. They are recorded for later, so you can always access the video and share with your colleagues. And we really try to use the opportunity to have conversations about topics of interest in a broad sense. So today we're again talking about the connected human and body computing and wearables, and our hashtag for today is ConnectedX. So if you'd like to tweet us any comments or questions, please use ConnectedX. We will save some time to try to answer questions that may come in. So the space around wearables is intriguing. There are many benefits that we can see, especially in the health space, monitoring our sleep patterns, how much walking we're doing, things like blood sugar, and the innovations go on and on. There's also a fair amount of personal data that's flowing through empowering these devices as well. So we have all of the same security, personal data, and privacy risks with any information system that interacts with humans. So we have a great panel that's going to talk to you today and have a little discussion about this topic. So I would like to start in the order of the panel as we see it here today, and I'll move to my left. And I would like to ask our first panelist, Dr. Leslie Saxon, to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about kind of your unique perspective regarding wearable technologies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Leslie Saxon, and I'm an interventional cardiologist who does arrhythmia work. I specialize in sudden cardiac death, and I've been putting in implantable sensors in the form of high-end defibrillators that treat heart disease and are amazing diagnostic devices with tons of sensors for 20 years. I became interested when those devices became capable of network transmission so that we could look at hundreds of thousands of patients daily information from their implanted device. I saw the potential to really advance knowledge in that regard, make earlier diagnoses, and enfranchise the patients in their own care. So that sort of motivated me to start the Center for Body Computing 8 years ago, which really deals with everything digital health can be, harnessing the ruthless efficiency of digital for healthcare outcomes for the globe. And from my vantage point, wearable sensing is very early, and it's mostly impacting now wellness, sort of. If you look at sales, if you look at the products and the sales, it's mostly sort of a wellness fitness application. Where I really see it going, however, is the idea that we can bring in the patient who is increasingly a consumer because of changes in medical policy, increasing copays, and we can really, for the first time, use sensing to allow a consumer to learn more about their medical condition, have a continuous diagnostic experience, and be able to receive medical content. Then the doctor and the care providers are used in such a way that they help facilitate that experience and are used on an as-needed basis. Additionally, the culture of medical care delivery changes because people are understanding better how to increase their healthcare experience, how to increase their resilience and performance in general, because they have the sensor-enabled direction. It's almost like a personal trainer meets continuous diagnostics. A personal trainer meets having a doctor available anywhere, anytime. When you do that, you create an unprecedented amount of healthcare literacy almost passively. So those are some of my main motivators in working in this space as actively as I do. And our center has activities in both chronic disease management, diabetes, heart failure, as well as in elite sports performance, because it's the same sensor often, it's the same set of issues, how to help people understand themselves better and increase and self-learn and increase their resilience, performance, and experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll get into the questions when we get through the introductions. And so that was wonderful. I have a much better idea of your perspective. And could we hear from Karen Lightman from the MEMS Industry Group? Karen, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your unique perspective around wearables and body computing?
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I'm just honored to be here, and also this is my first Google Hangout. So Dr. Leslie Saxon, I was just writing a couple of notes about what you're talking about. And so I'm Executive Director of MEMS Industry Group. We are the one and only in the universe supply chain ecosystem, if you will. We represent the entire ecosystem of MEMS and sensors. So for those of you who don't know, MEMS stands for Micro Electro Mechanical Systems, MEMS. We have been around for almost 14 years. We have about 170 members and partners internationally. We put on conferences and events. We also do partner events at things like mHealth, where I'll be in a couple of weeks, as well as CES, where I'll be actually doing a full-day conference track on wearables at CES. And our main focus is to to enable the future that Dr. Saxon is talking about, and that I'm sure we'll talk about later when we hear from the other panelists. Our main focus is to help overcome those remaining hurdles, issues like standardization, hence I'm here with IEEE, barriers to commercialization, issues of interoperability, and then also creating open platforms. We are a neutral forum for discussion. We bring together the players within the field of MEMS and sensors, and our role is to create more opportunity, to create that commercialization, so we can see a vision of MEMS and sensors everywhere, where we have that healthcare and wellness, where the patient is empowered. And so I'll stop there, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Excuse me. So moving forward, next in our panel is Jay Oreo. Jay, could you tell us a bit about yourself, and also could you tell us if you'll be participating in the mHealth event as well while we're getting it set up here. Thanks, Jay.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jay Iorio. I'm the Director of Innovation at the IEEE Standards Association. My primary focus is, I come at wearables in a sort of tangential way. My primary focus is mixed reality and virtual worlds. So in one sense, the wearables impinge on my area in this way, some way to visualize this coming onslaught of data from a variety of sources, and also the fact that the human body is really poised to become the key node on the network. I'm sure Oleg will talk about the Internet of Things, but the sort of the Internet of Everything, where the human body really becomes a central piece. And one of the, I'll talk about a little bit later, I suppose, one of the strategies of pulling this together is really creating interdisciplinary groups of people who up until now might not have realized that they have a lot to talk about. We're going to have new models of content, and a lot of the content will come from the body and sort of working on a vision of, in a sense, the computer exploding onto the built environment, so that information is displayed everywhere, coming from a variety of sources, and a linchpin of this, I think, is going to be the body and biometrics.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, a lot of interesting points coming through. I personally find the bringing together of the communities who've not been together previously a really interesting space to work with. So we'll get into that a little bit. And we have Oleg Lagmanov, who's back. So Oleg, could you give us a little bit of an introduction? Tell us about yourself, your unique perspective around computing, body computing, wearables, and if you'll be participating in the mHealth event.
Sure. Hi, Jerry, and hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here, and this discussion is very interesting.
We can't hear Oleg. At least I can't hear Oleg.
Oh my God.
So we're going to, sorry, Oleg, we can't hear you. So we're going to see if we can sort your, if you're on mute, if you can unmute yourself, that's great. If not, then we're going to have to move forward, and I'm hopeful that your audio will come back shortly. Sorry about that. So that said, one of the things that I wanted to discuss was around the healthcare, and you know, Leslie talked about a number of different kind of sensors and modes and areas for delivery, and so I'm wondering about the kind of what are some of the more innovative benefits? Can we talk a little bit more about that body computing can bring around for life improvement? I think this point around just even teaching the person to be more health aware sounds wonderful. So what are some of the kind of real benefits, and some beyond than the average person might notice in the news today? And also, when we're thinking about the benefits, could you also kind of talk to us a little bit about the risk areas? So where might we need some more attention when we're combining with these body computing? So benefits and risks, and I wanted to start with Dr. Saxon. If you could tell us a little bit more about some of the benefits we may not read in the news or may not be so obvious, and kind of how you guys are viewing, how's USC viewing the security and risk space, maybe things like HIPAA, with all of the data that's moving through the devices.
Well, this is a really important thing to touch on. What's the experience of getting signals from your body computer? What's the UI UX of that, and how is it used across all sorts of different things? Internally, to discover better habits for yourself. Maybe it's something as simple as tracking your cigarettes or your food, and that kind of enlightenment that comes from this sense that, oh, I really didn't realize I either smoked that much or ate that much, and then kind of a discovery process. But what keeps you in a sensing experience long term? I think that's a really interesting question. I can tell you that a lot of the success or failure of products is going to depend on that. The other is, what's the decision support around it? You know, your car just tells you that you need to go in and it needs to get something done, and it's simple. You don't exactly know what's going on in the engine or whatever, but just, so what's that going to look like for health? We have a lot of experience with a number of different sensors. One I can tell you about is the AliveCore sensor, which is an ECG enabled by an iPhone. It's an attachment to an iPhone, or you can put it right next to an iPhone. You get your 30-second 12-lead EKG. We've used that extensively for a number of years in athletes, in patients, and in consumers. We're giving away 5,000 to the world without a real experience yet, without a real app. And what we're finding is people are very curious about their ECG, that they learn their ECG, that they're comforted by the fact that they can collect an ECG anywhere, anytime, port it to the cloud, pull it down for their doctor to look at. We've recently put an application on the iTunes store that allows people to attach their heart rate to photo sharing. It's called Biogram. So what would it be like in an Instagram-like experience if you can attach biometrics? And as the Apple Watch and the Samsung offering come out, if Apple is going to have 10 million people collecting biometrics, what's the experience going to be around that? It's going to be really important, other than the ability to self-diagnose. And then how does that change the healthcare consumer environment? If suddenly you're in a time when you don't have to go to the doctor, but you can diagnose yourself with a sensor, port it somewhere, both you and the doctor get decision support algorithms that give you a next direction, that completely upends, I think, in a very positive way, the way that healthcare is delivered. And then to Jay's point, there are many, many examples that we're working also on bringing in virtual humans or immersive environments to further enhance either medical content learning or sensor interpretation, or to extend the doctor. Use virtual humans to take interviews, to examine whether or not patients disclose more or are more comfortable, particularly if we're going for continuous health care and talking to a virtual human, maybe it's an avatar of their doctor, maybe it isn't, about their healthcare symptoms or issues. So we're trying to keep track with both the sensor environment as well as the progress in mixed and immersive, realities to really fully deliver this and have it scale. I can tell you that personally, I've diagnosed things that I never thought I would diagnose in crazy places because I have this ECG and I can apply it to people I come in contact with, and it has profound. I've been doing arrhythmia work my whole life, athletics, sudden death research, etc., and I have discovered things that have greatly advanced my understanding of conditions that we don't fully understand with continuous diagnostics, just being there at the time a person was having a problem. It's true for animals too. These devices are approved for animals. It's been an amazing, and it's only the beginning. So the form factor is something else I'll touch upon. So as I mentioned to you, I implant $30,000 defibrillators that treat heart failure that are the ultimate kind of in body computing. But sensors are maturing and becoming much more accurate and much more continuous, and they can measure different things. We're also in an era of minimally invasive implantable sensors that have huge benefits potentially for athletes or special forces people who can't just put something on and wear it for a certain amount of time. So all this stuff is happening, and it's the job of the creative community, the medical community, the development community to create engaging experiences around them.
And so, Leslie, just one more follow-on. Is any kind of consideration or thoughts around kind of HIPAA? How do the current healthcare data regulations, is that something that you work with in your team, or kind of could you tell us a little bit about how maybe the older HIPAA data regulations kind of translate or apply within the new technology space?
Well, medical information privacy is sacrosanct, and the privacy of even elite athletic information is potentially very valuable, personal and private for the athlete. So there needs to be a governance around all that ultimately is focused on protecting either the patient, the consumer, or the athlete, and not about another purpose, including profiteering, in my view. So how do you do that? How do you create a governance that protects people? And I think you create it with a lot of thought, goodwill, trust, and a multidisciplinary conversation of everybody involved, namely the person whose data is being collected. Right now, what we're doing in terms of this is, look, in order to really be able to make good predictions from people getting data from their body computers, you need big data. You need lots of people streaming in these data sets. So they need to be able to do that in a HIPAA-compliant way. You need to be able to communicate back in a way that's protected wirelessly, and then you need to be able to apply analytics to that data. And you can de-identify the patients. You can do all sorts of things to protect the individual. But the value of this is in getting lots of data feeds, because that will assure accurate predictive analytics. So, and it's going to work out over time. If Apple ends up having consumers keep all the data on their phone, and then they can share it intermittently or share which pieces they want, that's kind of the ultimate personal privacy, right? That you have all this data on your computer, it's nominally in the cloud, but that doesn't necessarily lend itself to global health observations. So the area is going to have to mature, and there's going to have to be a lot of thought. I personally think the earlier people work on a governance of how they're going to handle it, and we try to do that with patients, we try to do that with athletes. Why are we doing this? How are we going to protect people? What's it going to look like? What are the feelings of the people we're collecting data from? How do they want it used? How could it be used for nefarious reasons? How do we protect against that? It's just a lot of thought and work, I think.
Yeah, like every good problem, a lot of thought and work are a beginning to the solution. So if we stayed in the same kind of area of question, and what I'd like to do is slightly tweak it a little bit and ask Karen. Karen, you mentioned that part of what you do is really kind of connect different industry organizations and help to build kind of a bigger space around MEMS as part of the MEMS industry group. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the different kind of economic opportunities and risks in terms of building business, in terms of new markets, and kind of where are the economic, what do you see in your group as some of the
Right.
economic benefits and risks?
Well, first of all, I am in love with Dr. Saxon, and because everything you're saying, I'm like, you're right on, sister. I absolutely agree. And one of the things that I just wanted to point up on or follow up on was a wearable success is when the wearer doesn't know it's there. So that's a really important aspect about when you're talking about market success. Like I have a Jawbone Up that I wear, and it sometimes drives me nuts, and so I throw it off, and so it sits on my, and I know friends like this who the wearable is just not working for them. So if we're going to have a successful product, it's really about the wearable being part of who we are. I mean, we joked earlier about having implantables, like diagnostics or some sort of, like I would love for my teenager to have some sort of chip in the back of her head, but so I could track her, but that's perhaps not realistic just yet. But I think in terms of the technology is here. I mean, it's very clear to me that the MEMS and sensor technology to enable a wired and connected world is here. We have the accelerometers, we have the microspectrometers, we have, you know, all the technology that we have for doing the kinds of things that Dr. Saxon is talking about. And actually, I was on a panel prep call for my mHealth panel that I'll be doing on standards, and all the technology is here. It's about adoption, and it's about understanding the consumer and the person who is ultimately going to wear it. And that's why actually it's something that we've been talking about within our industry association is this concept of co-creation. So it's really going to be important that we do this together, that it's collaborative, that we have all the parties involved. That's a big part of our mantra, is to have that collaborative model. And so we get together, like you're talking about, you know, the Apple iPhone. I'm actually really curious. I mean, Apple with its iPhone 6, it has all these health stats on the phone itself, and yet at the same time they're introducing a watch, and then, you know, there's Google Glass, and there's all these different wearables, if you will. I'm very curious to see what is picked up and what will take hold. But to get there, we have to deal with issues like standardization. We have to deal with issues of privacy and security, which are two separate issues, right? So security is one, and I think we're still trying to crack that nut. And it's something that I know that we're working on within the industry, that at the chip level, that security is embedded in the chip. And then privacy is another one as well. You know, we all know about the hacker who hacked into his own diabetes, machine or whatever on himself to show that he could do it. You know, I watch Homeland. I saw when, you know, the vice president died because they were able to hack into his pacemaker, and apparently Dick Cheney was worried about that too. I don't know if that's realistic, but we've got to create some safety around, obviously, privacy, security. Standardization is really critical. Interoperability is really critical. And so I think the technology is there. It is here. You know, for example, just a few weeks ago, I hosted a senior executive conference called MEMS Executive Congress, and we had a company, it's actually their research group out of Finland called VTT. They're working on a microspectrometer to diagnose malignant melanoma. All right, and I myself am actually just getting off the tail end of a battle with skin cancer. I would have loved to have had that. You know, I would have loved to have that app on my phone. So my doctor, or even myself, I could have, you know, gone to that mole and said, oh crap, I need to get that thing removed right now. You know, rather than, oh, that looks weird, I should go get that checked out, which is pretty much, or people who don't even realize that they have that, you know. So I think, like you were talking about with the EKG, Dr. Saxon, if we have the technology, we can rebuild it, you know, we can use that technology. Now it's about mobilizing it into products where the consumer doesn't know it's there, but it's improving their life. I hope I answered your question, plus a few more.
You did, and you had so many pieces in there that are, you know, I like to think about security and privacy as security as the protection of information, and privacy is actually about sharing of information and what structures and tools that you use to do that. So I think that there's a very interesting space there. And one of the things that we also say, and I work in the identity management industry mostly, and one of the things that we like to say now is, even though the space has moved to devices, devices are really key in this new world, there's always a human behind every device. I mean, we have to think that there's a human behind every device. And so that means that, connecting these schools of thought around the hardware engineering to the software engineering to the governance. And so this interdisciplinary collaboration is going to be really, really key, but it's an exciting time. So let's move on, and I'm going to ask the next question, and I'm going to hope that we can hear Oleg now, because I'm going to ask him to introduce himself at the same time. But the next question I had is a bit more on the technical side, is that if we have, some are projecting that we will have around 75 billion smart devices, connected devices, by the year 2020. And so there are lots of estimates, but that's one. We have systems that can manage persons' identities. We have systems that can manage device identities. But as you start to kind of converge humans and devices, you also get these interesting relationships which have metadata about themselves as well. So in this new space where we have devices in the 75 billions that are all connected to users in some ways, what are some of the kind of strategic approaches for software and hardware interoperability to actually start to manage to that level of scale, which we haven't seen before? So I want to talk about interoperability at scale, and perhaps standardization at scale in these devices, hardware and software. And Oleg, would you also introduce yourself briefly? Hopefully we can hear you now, and then move on to the question. And Oleg is frozen. So at least he appears frozen to my screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ask Jay. Jay, would you talk to us a bit about the kind of interoperability at scale, what you kind of think or see from a futurist perspective? This is a new scale of device and human management. So could you tell us a little bit about kind of what you're seeing and what you think?
Sure. I was kind of looking forward to what Oleg was going to say, but this will be a different answer. My main interest, I think, I could summarize by saying we have new demands for content that are coming in this next generation of technologies. I see, and we currently refer to these areas as separate: augmented reality, big data, cloud computing, biometrics, and so forth. But I think ultimately they're going to blend in with each other. And I think the best thing I can do at this point is to try to establish a community of people who traditionally have never really thought of themselves as part of a community, and maybe have never really considered standards as one of the energizing forces of the work. And that would include people in a very wide net, including storytellers, filmmakers, games developers, architects. Ultimately, the content in this new kind of wired age is really going to come from a different place. And I'm fortunate to live in a city where we have some of the best visual storytellers in the world in Los Angeles. I think the film industry could very constructively be brought in. All of these things are stories, they're narratives, and I know that term gets overused a lot, but really you look at the human body and it's a story. It has a beginning, it has an end, it faces challenges, it has to overcome those challenges, and ideally the protagonist grows through the experience. We also have the built environment, the urban environment, the home, buildings, and so forth. I think it's difficult for me to look at these issues outside of that context. Game developers, for example, have, I think, traditionally thought of themselves as a silo. You write to a console, and that's the end of it. I think games are much more powerful than that. I think games are really a way to systematize experiences. And that can, I think we're going to need that as almost a skeleton, a narrative skeleton, as these technologies evolve. So I would like to see the net cast very wide, much wider than it's traditionally been cast for these types of strictly technical activities, because I don't think they are really technical activities. As the technologies evolve, in a sense, they become more invisible and more human, and so we need human techniques in order to describe them, to make sense of them, to integrate them, and so forth. On a practical level, that means enormous amounts of just a lot of interoperability questions. I think standards are crucial to it, but they're standards that we might not have thought of traditionally, standards that cut across industries, and conversations among constituencies that really have never spoken before and have never really thought of the need for it. I think it all boils down to the kind of content that we're going to have. It's a new kind of content. It's not a phone app necessarily. It's well-wrought stories. So I think the high-level strategy that I would envision is really casting the net wide and bringing a lot of people, artists, creative people, into the technical discussion right from the outset, so that we end up with a robust infrastructure.
Thank you, Jay. Just so you know, a little bit of background for me around this question is, I've worked in, I wear two hats. One is as the IEEE SA Trust and Identity Technology Evangelist, but the other hat, which I've been in for over a decade, is working specifically on identity management standardization, industry standards. So this has been very software-based, and everything has moved into the future with kind of this connection to devices. And and the group that I serve, the Kantara Initiative, we're finding, yes, we find some very interesting spaces when you're connecting the different communities. And so I think as much as the communities can be connected, and we're just trying to think of ways to maybe modularize or approach these different layers for trust and verifying the hardware and software. It's a really challenging space, but the opportunities are massive. So if I could move to Karen, you mentioned a lot about interoperability. So I'm wondering, in the MEMS industry group, kind of what's your strategy or approach in terms of interoperability or broad interoperability? Are you focusing kind of more on your space, or are you trying to cast a wider net? What are some of your thoughts, or what do you see?
Well, thank you. And actually, again, I'm like so honored to be here, because all this stuff, I'm like just drinking it up, and you're singing to the choir right here. Interoperability is critical, and so and the issue of standards is right there with that. And so our model at MEMS Industry Group is to work with our member companies. So we have, the companies like Bosch and ST and Kyonix, et cetera, that are making the devices that go in, and so they're the ones that are going to be those, they're the ones that and foundries have that control about this, performance and standardization. But then it goes to that next level. So it's the Apples and the Googles and et cetera that are going to take it, and they want interoperability. They want to have their products be plug and play, if you will. And so the challenge is the companies on that supply chain, like the device manufacturers that I just mentioned and the foundries, they want to have their special sauce. They want to stand out. They want to show that they are better than the rest. They want to sell more, obviously, because they want to make more money. They want to please shareholders, whatever. And so it's that balance, and they want to, obviously, they want to protect their IP, right? And so you've got this balance between being competitive as well as being plug and play. And honestly, right now, the industry is still maturing. We're not there yet. So there's a couple areas where you can have that kind of plug and play component where you're getting, plugged into the defibrillator monitoring thingy that Dr. Saxon was talking about. But the reality is, for it to go mainstream, for it to be, worldwide, and where it's affecting lives and improving the world, which is, what it's all about, It's got to be interoperable. I can't say that word. So the standards need to be there. And so what we do is at the MEMS Industry Group, we not only bring together those competitors and have them understand that they have a common interest. And so we created an IEEE standard on performance specs to do that. But we also bring and work with partners. So we work with HIMSS, we work with Continua, we work with IEEE and NIST and others to help progress that conversation so that we have more people in the room and that more people understand that by working together, they're going to achieve that end goal where everybody wins, as opposed to just a few kind of trying to break in, but without that big success factor. So I think there's a lot of potential. We're just at the cusp of it, and I feel like the future is really bright.
Thank you so much, Karen. We do have a question that has come in, and we do have the hashtag ConnectedX. So if you're out there and you're watching and you'd like to send us a question or a comment, please use the hashtag ConnectedX. So we do have a first question that's come in, and this is for Dr. Saxon. Dr. Saxon says that connected body computing, UPenn's healthcare. How do we work together? So this is patient enthusiasm. How do we actually get hospitals and insurers on board? What type of what do we need to do to get kind of a broader layer of adoption and that trust from the hospitals and insurance side of things beyond the how the patient thinks that it's really cool? So Dr. Saxon, could you maybe share us a little bit of your thoughts on how we get hospitals and insurers to start adopting the technology and recognizing it?
Sure. This is, kind of healthcare, absent digital health or body computing, is changing more than it's changed since the Great Society right now. There have been a number of changes both with the Affordable Care Act and change around reaction to the Affordable Care Act that's been profound. So, for instance, most people have access to insurance. Co-pays are much higher. For the first time ever, most doctors work for healthcare organizations versus private practice. Consumers have an unprecedented increase in the amount they'll be responsible for. So that always creates more interest when you have kind of a dog in the fight economically. Insurers and hospitals are really looking for solutions that allow them to meet new standards that they are now having to meet. Things like reducing readmissions and not getting paid by Medicare if a patient gets readmitted after a certain time after a discharge. How do they show the payers that they are meeting treatment guidelines, that patients are on the right drugs according to society guidelines that show that these drugs improve outcomes? So all of this, there's a huge compliance burden. The electronic medical record, for the first time in history, hospitals in the United States have liquid information in the form of an electronic medical record. How do these solutions relate to that? So I think that it's good in the sense that people are looking at other solutions. Insurers are some of the earliest adopters of some of these sensor-driven solutions because they want to know that when a patient gets home, they're not going to decompensate these sort of high-risk times after a hospitalization, for instance, or being able to detect with a minimally invasive implantable sensor in an artery and an artery of your lung, being able to detect if somebody's going to come into the hospital for a costly admission 6 weeks before they get symptomatic. All of these types of technologies are there, and people are looking at them. This is a time of fragmentation, digital fragmentation, just like we had fragmentation in healthcare, and it's going to be crazy for a while. But I think that insurers are sometimes adopting these things before large healthcare providers. I think the problem for a healthcare system is it's also early. What solution do you buy? And you're getting sold for a lot of kind of one-off solutions, but what's the holistic solution that will allow you to really manage your population at risk or under care? And that field is just maturing, but it's all happening. So there's another very important thing we didn't talk about that a friend of mine, Don Jones, calls the interlopers. There are all of these other entities that are becoming new healthcare systems themselves, like Walmart or CVS. Walmart has 2 million employees, 700,000 outside the U.S. They have clinics. They have associations with insurers that allow them to provide drugs for as little as $40 clinic visits. They're becoming, in part because of some of the digital stuff, very influential. So we also have new players into healthcare. Wireless carriers have FDA compliant clouds to store information. So it's not just the traditional players, it's everybody else. And then the traditional drug and device makers are realizing that they're not just selling a drug or a device, they're selling a healthcare management solution. And that almost necessarily implies some software or some interface to the patient, which is a great thing. Forces them to think about the real end user of their products. They're many times incredible products, and I think it will help them iterate those products in a way that's much more interesting and on an accelerated path than before, because they're getting, the patient's input, not just the doctor who implants it or prescribes it. And I think they see the value in that.
So, Dr. Saxon, you also reminded me of a conversation that I've had with a couple of organizations that I won't name, but they were hardware companies who were actually hesitant to even get in because of concerns around their if something failed with the security or interoperability, that they would have some severe brand damage. So, it sounds like there's still a way to go in terms of the adoption, but actually for insurers, there's a good economic incentive. There is a good economic incentive to start using these technologies so that we can do early healthcare interventions. So that's a very positive motion, and I like to say sometimes it's carrots and sticks. And so there's carrots with your economic benefits or your money or your savings, and your compliance programs, and all of those bits are the sticks that people need to follow to make the environment safer. So I'm thinking that
basically, I hate to interrupt you, but where there is reward, there is risk. It's just managing the risk. There's risk to all of this, and some of it can be profound, and there will be major disasters as a result of it. And we'll manage those, and we'll correct systems. That's just going to happen. I don't think that doesn't mean you can't move forward, though. You have to try to do everything you can to prevent, but there is risk in liquefying this kind of delicate information, just like there is in defense, just like and we've been made aware of that with the NSA stuff, etc. So I think we should be thoughtful about it, but there's also enormous promise. And if you think about the empowerment that digital has provided people, they've given up a lot of privacy and a lot of other things for it, but they continue to do so. Why? Because it meets needs anywhere, anytime, and it's ruthlessly efficient. Is it also ruthlessly evil? Does it also allow potentially for some? Yeah, it does. But the question is, if you're talking about something as profound as bringing healthcare to everybody on the globe, or having the convenience and the cost savings of some of this virtual stuff, it is pretty promising.
Yeah, it's definitely a new frontier and has a lot of promise globally. That's a very exciting space to be in. I'm wondering, it's the same from Karen, in your industry group, do you work with kind of at the level of adoption of different parties? So let's say the insurers or the hospitals or doctors. Do you also work in this area of building the case for adoption and making the environment very positive for adoption?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I want to echo what Dr. Saxon said about that the risk is there, obviously, but, the reward is going to be so great. And so I wanted to actually shine a light on a company that is led by a friend and colleague, Mark Winter, who was formerly with the X Prize, right? And they did the Tricorder X Prize to ignite innovation to help create this tricorder with all these sensors on it. So Mark is now at a company called CareSpan, and what they're doing is creating a platform whereby we can create, we can empower individuals around the world, especially in lower income and third world or developing nations, to have access to care and self-diagnose. And so the work that we're doing, like I'm pretty far removed from the hospitals. I'm in our association, I mean, I speak at conferences, we'll interface with them, but our work is really at the seed of it, right? It's at the creation of the technology, the MEMS and sensors that go into the device that then gets into the hands of a doctor and is adopted. So again, standards, interoperability are really key. And then the imagination takes over, right? And so that you have companies and research organizations like GE and others that are taking that to the next level. So I think I would love to be able to talk to every doctor in America and talk to them so they don't have that fear that I think that sometimes has been created in the media about MEMS and sensors and nanotechnology being in your bloodstream or being fearful of it, because I think the benefits of those technologies are far going to outweigh the possible risks. So that would be my mantra and my message to them if I could get out there. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned using your imagination, and I wanted to go over to Jay and talk a little bit about using our imaginations. And I wanted to remind everyone of the ConnectedX hashtag if you'd like to send in comments or questions. So Jay, kind of you mentioned in your intro that you're focusing on future technologies and augmented reality. And what I was wondering is if you could kind of give us what you see as some visions in the space around how wearables and augmented reality, either how they are intersecting or how they may intersect moving forward.
Sure. I think at the highest altitude, I see these technologies evaporating from the point of view of the user. Ultimately, as the technologies become more powerful, they become more integrated into our environment. So, in a sense, we could walk into 2050 now and see not a whole lot of difference. Maybe the light switches would look different, but little subtle differences, when in fact we're inhabiting a robot. I mean, to put it one way, the built environment becomes the computer in a sense. Objects become intelligent. We become intelligent on the network. Our bodies. So, I mean, I can see superficially, the future might look very similar to what we have today, except what the end user, it's hard to think of what the citizen will see, might be a completely customized overlay. Three people can walk down the same street and see very different things. I mean, you could argue that that's the case now, but and certainly with people with phones. But ultimately, what we have is really, I think, that the specter of very customized, continuous content feeds that, as Karen and Leslie mentioned, there are risks involved, and especially when but the benefits outweigh them. But when you combine all these technologies together, you see that I think issues of identity really become cloudy. It's very unclear in 30 years what real is going to be and what identity is going to be, especially if, I mean, to get very futuristic, let's say software is really creating identities for specific purposes that appear to you and me like a real person. I have no idea what the implications of that will be legally, ethically, but it's inevitably going to come. So I would say that the smartest way to handle it would be to address these issues right at the outset rather than trying to impose them on top later, sort of like the security of a computer system. It's most secure when these issues are sort of thought of from the outset of the design.
Excellent. It's an interesting idea that the world may look very similar, but what's happening underneath is going to be very different. That's a really interesting concept. And we don't have our flying cars yet, but we're getting pretty close to some of this stuff, so it's going to be a very interesting time. Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask of the panel across the board is, if there were one area around healthcare, wearables, technology, one kind of vector or area of focus that you would suggest to people as kind of to organizations as the space to watch or the place to get involved where they could be impactful, what would you say is the kind of top priority that needs this collaboration or for adoption? What's the top priority in wearables for healthcare today? And I wanted to start with Dr. Saxon and then work across.
So there's kind of one really sexy area to work in and then another that isn't so much. So I'll start with the one that isn't so much, and that would be big data analytics and decision support is going to be a monster business. And so anyone with talents in that area will do very well. And there's also a lot of creativity and things like that. I don't mean to discount it, but from sports to medicine, all of these solutions are going to need big data analytic problems and AI, artificial intelligence problems. So that's an area. The second area would be I think in the creative community, not only software developers, UI, UX, but the use of video and other storytelling methods, as Jay and we've all discussed, to engage the user and keep them into these health experiences and sensor experiences and not just have them drop off after 6-8 weeks like a lot of the current generation wearable sensors that may provide some initial insight but don't have any durability in terms of real potentially habit change. You know, there's just a study that came out that said, I think from UCLA, that said digital weight loss, whatever it was, didn't compare, and it wasn't any better than traditional weight loss. So there has to be, it has to be better, not just convenient, in my view. So I would think those two areas are really, big areas.
Excellent. The not so sexy and the sexy. Thank you so much, Dr. Saxon. Karen, what would you say is the one area that we need to pay the closest attention to for priority for those who want to be impactful?
Well, I actually find big data analytics very sexy, so I'm going to go even less sexier and talk about standards. I think is actually the most important aspect to this, because we need that plug-and-play component for it to be in more devices, and then we'll see the widespread adoption. And so I'm a big purporter of standards and also open source. And so that's part of what we're doing at MEMS Industry Group. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'll plug it again. We've created what we call the Accelerated Innovation Collaborative, AIC. It's at our website, memsindustrygroup.org/AIC, and it's the first ever open source for exactly what Dr. Saxon was talking about. It's that analytics component. So it's the algorithms that will take the sensor and then create smart data. Then you take that smart data and you use it in a productive way. So it's that whole supply chain, and I find that extremely sexy and very exciting and has the biggest impact and potential. So, go algorithms. Yay.
Okay, open source and algorithms, and thank you for the pointers. So, Jay, the one area that you think is the most area for focus, the highest priority where people and organizations want to be impactful?
I can't pick one. I would say standards. I would say that everything that my co-panelists have said, I agree with. I would say standards are key. Interoperability is the glue of all of this. And I would say content. We really have different kinds of content coming in, and part of it is going to be biometric content. Part of it is going to be content that we can't conceivably predict from sources we can't predict, from art forms that don't have names yet, that haven't really evolved yet. So I would say that standards offer the most durable platform for the unknown in the future, and we're going to have plenty of that. We don't know where the content is going to be coming from. We don't really know how we're going to want to integrate that in real time, no less. So I would say content and standards work sort of hand in glove in this, and I would really like to see people focusing on that.
Well, leaving with the innovation side and kind of focusing on the things that we don't even know yet. That's going to be a very interesting space. It sounds like standards are going to be key, open source, and making sure we're properly working with big data and some of these kind of interdisciplinary collaborations. So we've got work to do. There's a lot of benefit that's already coming from these devices and from these systems. And so we will have the just wanted to mention we will have this hangout will be being recorded, so you can all watch it. I'm sure you can reach out further to our fabulous panelists if you'd like to talk to them more. I wanted to thank each of our panelists for sharing your visions and your thoughts today. You've been really, really great. I wish we had 2 hours because I think we could even go deeper. So thanks for sharing all of your insights, and please do watch online. Thank you for those of you who are watching now. Enjoy for joining us, and please do feel free to send the links out to others who you think might be interested in body computables, wearable IoT, and kind of all of the pieces that make this amazing innovation happen. From me, Joni Brennan, the technology evangelist for trust and identity at IEEE SA, it's always a pleasure to join and help to moderate these talks. And when I have such a great panel as this, it can't get any better. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, panelists, and we'll see you all soon. And have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.